So this horrific entrance happens and the games start. Instantly, it's not a bloodbath, actually. In fact, it's quite slow. But here's the highlights. So the District 6 tributes are gone, right? I think there are only 14 tributes left by the time that they start the game. And I don't want to go too much in the games in gory detail because it's a lot and it spans over quite a few days. But here's what basically happens. From where Marcus is hanging, there is like a sort of beam mechanism. I don't know how they're going to do it in the film because I never really understood how it's like all built. But basically, Marcus is being hung from this beam thing. Lamina is also trying to climb this beam mechanism, and so Lamina kills Marcus. He is the first one to go. And Lamina does this thing where like she climbs up to the top of the beam, which must have like a weird sort of flat surface, and she practically sits herself down there. She lies down with everything that she has and she sleeps there. How she does that, I have no idea. I do not physically know how somebody can like with a human body like lie down on a beam and like not roll over while they're sleeping. I don't know how she does that, but girly was a trooper. And so Lamina sets up camp there and she keeps herself safe. Then the next morning, Dill, who is the female District 11 tribute, is brought out by one of like the tunnels, because remember this place was previously bombed. So now there's like a lot of like hidden places where tributes can hide. Dill is taken by Reaper Ash out of one of the tunnels into the sunlight, and it is seen that Dill is bleeding from her mouth, which suggests that she could have had tuberculosis. And by sunset or by sunrise, Dill dies. After these two deaths, nothing really eventful kind of happens, and Coriolanus and the rest of the mentors go home. Coriolanus goes home to Tigress and the Grandmam, and lo and behold, somebody extra, Mrs. Plinth. And so it turns out that Sejanus had gone missing, doesn't know where her son is, and Ma, or Mrs. Plinth, is crying. The Grandmam is pissed that Ma is in her house in the first place. And also, mind you, the Snows have never let anybody into their home to see what their home truly looks like. The Grandmam is pissed. Tigress is trying to comfort her. Sejanus will probably show up at some point. Don't worry, don't freak out. And then, lo and behold, in the television that is right before all four of them, somebody's figure pops out in the screen, and we find out that that person is Sejanus. That's right, Sejanus Plinth snuck into the arena at night. Everyone is fucking bewildered. As a result, Dr. Gall calls Coriolanus, and she's like, hey bro, what the fuck is your friend doing in this arena? Mind you, Coriolanus still hates Sejanus Plinth. But because they were at school, Snow offered Sejanus like a seat to sit next to him when he was having another tantrum in the class. And so they kind of got stuck together as friends, or at least they were seen as friends by everybody else. But every single time in his head, Coriolanus was like, we're not friends. I don't like this dude. But nobody knows that outside. We just know that from Coriolanus's thoughts. And so he gets driven with Sejanus's mother to the arena, and Dr. Gall makes Coriolanus go into the arena to go fetch Sejanus Plinth. This is a very dangerous thing to do. But Coriolanus is ushered into this arena, and so he's like going to try and retrieve Sejanus. The reason that Sejanus is even in this arena in the first place is because he wanted to dump like breadcrumbs on Marcus's body, which is a sort of like ritual that they do in District 2, as you know, so that he can have food in the afterlife. Coriolanus still hates Sejanus Plinth, and in his head he calls the districts primitive. These primitive districts with their primitive customs. Like I can't stand Coriolanus. He's such a hater in his head, but on the outside, he's just like trying to be as nice as possible to Sejanus so that they can get like the fuck out of this arena, right? So Coriolanus tells Sejanus that, look, man, if you're so hell-bent on helping the districts, you can't do it like this. This is dumb, okay? Use whatever you possibly can and help the tributes when you're outside and alive, because Sejanus, unfortunately, is feeling a little suicidal after all of this, and he's like, what's the point of living? So Sejanus listens to him, and they're about to leave the arena until Bobbin, the District 8 tribute, sees them and slices his arm. And now everything becomes extremely intense very, very quickly, and they both become chased by the tributes. And because Bobbin like slices Coriolanus's arm, Coriolanus takes something, it's a 2x4, he knocks Bobbin in the head, and Bobbin dies, and you think Bobbin is the only one who's aware of what happened. But then the group of Tanner, Coral, and Mizzen also run after Sejanus and Coriolanus, and so they barely escape with their lives. Mind you, the peacekeepers were supposed to help the two boys, but they didn't. Surprise, surprise. Tanner like slices Coriolanus's leg, but it was just like right by the barbed wire where they both escaped, right? And Coriolanus is pissed because the peacekeepers had told him that if anything happened, that they would come to save him and Sejanus, and the peacekeepers did not do that. But also remember, this is the first time that Coriolanus has actually killed somebody, and that really affects him, and he's kind of like mentally numb for a little bit, right? He doesn't really have as much time to process it. Also, the mentor for Bobbin doesn't know that her own tribute is dead, so she comes the next day and she finds out that Bobbin is dead, and they don't really explain to the people, to the capital, and to the rest of everybody how Bobbin died specifically. They just sort of gave a flimsy excuse. The next morning, another tribute dies called Sol. I also don't remember if Hai died in the bombings as well. I think he was one of the other tributes that died in the bombings. I'm not necessarily sure. But Sol dies the next morning. Her own mentor doesn't even remember her own name. He doesn't even know if her name was Sol or Sal. So that's kind of disturbing. And then that same day, another problem happens. So Lucy Gray, during this whole entire time, has not shown her face. And as a result, Coriolanus has not been able to give her food because the food comes through these drones that drop food for them, right? So Lucy Gray steps outside, and the reason she has to step outside is because the male tribute from District 12, Jessup Diggs, is not okay. Remember, I said earlier in this video that Jessup Diggs got bit by something that was not a rat, but something furrier. Well, when he comes outside, you can see like when he zoomed into that he's foaming at his mouth, and he's become quite rabid because he has rabies. And whatever bit him at the zoo, I think was a zoo raccoon, and it caused him to have rabies, but no one really paid attention to the children, so he could not have been treated for it, right? And so he's coming at Lucy Gray because they were both in the tunnels together, and he's like, he is chasing after Lucy Gray, and she doesn't know what to do. Coriolanus is also freaking out. A drone comes out, and it has water, and Lucy Gray is like supposed to fetch the water, but she can't because obviously Jessup is like kind of chasing her. And so Jessup kind of does this thing where he smacks the drone, and the water splashes him in the face. And then it is recognized when people have rabies, they become unnaturally afraid of water. So Coriolanus gets the idea and asks Lysistrata, who is the mentor for Jessup Diggs, to help him to get as much water as possible to distract Jessup from hurting Lucy Gray. Because of the overload of water, Jessup panics, and eventually he ends up like falling into something, and the place where he falls into has such good audio that the audience can hear his bones break. And in that moment, Lucy Gray goes to Jessup, and she sort of comforts him because she knows that he is about to die. She comforts him to sleep, and that is how Jessup dies. In the meantime, by the way, Reaper Ash has been collecting all the bodies of the dead tributes and sort of just like creating this weird line of dead bodies. And it's not really explained why he's doing that, but what he does is that he bargains with Lamina, who is still on the beam. And so she asks him for the Pan Am flag that she uses, like a piece of it that she uses to cover herself. And in like they sort of trade flag for food. He uses the piece of the Pan Am flag to cover the dead bodies as this sort of like, I guess, pseudo funeral. I am not really sure why that happens, but I guess maybe that's his way of just showing respect to the tributes. He might have also been doing this because there was no official count of when tributes died. There was no canon headshot established yet. I think, was it Coriolanus who mentioned that maybe they should start having a head count or like a headboard shot to show which tributes are dead. In Coriolanus's personal life, when he goes home, the tax bill comes. Before it was just an idea, but now it's officially been passed, and they have about 6 weeks to come up with the money to pay for the tax bill, and even then they still won't have enough money. So Coriolanus is also under a lot of pressure. A lot of other tributes die. Basically, Tanner, Mizzen, and Coral in this very gory, disturbing scene combined forces to end up killing Lamina. Tesley gets really smart with the drones, and District 3, it's a technology-based district, and so basically what happens is that Tesley gets smart enough to sort of rig the drones to come to her to give her food rather than going to the other tributes. And this works for a little bit. until it doesn't. It goes wrong, and then the drones end up chasing her and end up killing her. All the other tributes die, and the practical like final 5 include these 3, Lucy Gray and Reaper Ash. I'm just trying to summarize it so it doesn't get too gory, and I don't want YouTube to cancel me. Okay, while this is all happening, Coriolanus finally goes home after another day, and he is in the elevator. He notices that the snakes that bit Miss Clemencia, so he's wondering why these snakes are like around, and he thinks to himself, maybe these snakes will come back into the games because Dr. Grawl fucking hates everybody. So he remembers that he has a handkerchief from Lucy Gray, and so he cheats and he slips the handkerchief into the box and he leaves it in the box. So he cheats and he feels a little guilty about it, and he's worried, like, what if somebody from the Capitol finds out? Well, we'll get on that later. His theory is proven right, and the snakes are dropped into the arena, and instantly it is a bloodbath. The snakes go after everybody. They go after Coral, they go after Tanner, they go after Mizzen, they go after everybody, and they end up killing a lot of the tributes. Something peculiar happens, in which the snakes, when they reach Lucy Gray, because A, they have recognized her scent, they do not attack her immediately, as to where everybody else has to run for their lives and they still get attacked, right? But with Lucy Gray starts singing because in this weird way, she sort of accepted her death and she doesn't know that Coriolanus has done this for her, right? And so she sort of accepts her death and she starts singing this song, and yes, the snakes do not attack her, but then they sort of do this thing where, like, because she's sort of like the Pied Piper in this weird way. She is the Beyonce. She is serenading everybody. She don't fucking play with Lucy Gray. The snakes like sort of surround her. They circulate her dress in this like weird way, and she serenades them until they kind of mellow down. And because they are mutant snakes, by the next morning, they all kind of die because they're not really meant to survive in the wild. They are made from a laboratory. And everyone is like super mesmerized by this. Everyone's like, wow, like, oh my gosh, Lucy Gray, she's so special. And Coriolanus knows that the reason that they're doing that is, well, first of all, he slipped his handkerchief in there, but he doesn't really understand why the snakes surround her after she sings. And this begins also another chain of interest where Coriolanus like listens to a lot of Lucy Gray songs and he analyzes them in his head. But the thing is because the way Coriolanus is, when he analyzes Lucy Gray's songs, he always does it from like a very logical point of view. So he doesn't understand the whole like thing that Lucy Gray is doing with this song. And he just refuses to continue further, which shows you along the lines his lack of not just critical thinking skills, but his lack of ability to put himself in somebody else's shoes and understand things from an emotional standpoint, which we'll come back to later. So eventually it is just Reaper Ash and Lucy Gray, and Lucy Gray gets this idea, and basically she runs out to where Reaper Ash has been putting all the bodies, and she takes the Pan Am flag and she runs with the Pan Am flag. And so everyone's like super confused as to what she's doing. And so Coriolanus recognizes that she is trying to like basically trying to get him to run around a lot because it's extremely hot, and she's trying to make him like pass out from exhaustion because Clemencia this whole entire time has not been feeding her tribute because she is upset. Every time that she was supposed to feed her tribute, she used to say, oh, he hasn't done anything to deserve it, by the way, in this weird way to sort of spite Coriolanus Snow. But that doesn't really make sense because you're not spiting him, you're just hurting yourself. Right? Okay. And the reason that she's angry at Coriolanus Snow is because she felt like Coriolanus abandoned her when, you know, she was at the hospital and she was all alone, which was not his fault. But again, I digress. It's Pan Am. Lucy Gray is running around with this Pan Am flag, and then eventually Reaper gets super tired. And what Lucy Gray did was that she went to a puddle of water, and she like, I don't know, like she filtered water somehow. She did something with a bottle, and Reaper Ash goes to that same place to drink. Eventually he dies. It's theorized that Lucy Gray could have used rat poison to like poison the water to kill Reaper Ash, but it's not completely confirmed. But you and I both know it's very possible. Lucy Gray wins. And so Coriolanus is ecstatic. Coriolanus is out here. He is drinking Prosecco, which is like, I guess like capital wine. I'm not really sure. He's feeling himself. He's like, yeah, I got the girl. And also, I forgot to mention, as a result of Sejanus's actions in the arena, Strabo, his father, made sure to sort of compensate for it with his money by offering up a prize. And so basically, he said that there was going to be a plinth prize in the Hunger Games. So just to also make it more attractive for the students as well to continue fighting in the Hunger Games, to continue with the Hunger Games. And so whoever won the Hunger Games, their mentor would win the plinth prize. So Coriolanus is like, yeah, like I'm gonna win that prize, like period. So he is called in by Dean Casca Highbottom and Dr. Gall, apparently. So he's like, yeah, like I'm super excited, da da da. And so he's going to this place and he's like, ooh, 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 I want. And then he gets there and it's not Dr. Gall that meets him. Oh, no. It's Mr. Casca Highbottom. And Casca Highbottom has 3 things on a table. The compact, I think an old handkerchief with like some food, and has some items on the table, which include the compact that he gave Lucy Gray and the handkerchief that was in the box of snakes before they were released into the games. And Dean Casca Highbottom sends Coriolanus Snow to go and become a peacekeeper. I don't even know what to say to that. I was so shook. I was shooketh when I heard that. But anyways. After Coriolanus is made a peacekeeper, I will say, I think for at least the next 5 chapters, this is the most bearable Coriolanus Snow has ever been, up to the point that I was reading this book. And the only reason why that is because Snow has no hope for power, which makes him just a tiny bit bearable. As a peacekeeper, you have to serve for like 20 years before you can be let out. The only thing you can get to keep with you is like a small box of mementos from your family, like everyone who knows you, and you put it in the small box and that's kind of it. And it's kind of like being shipped off to the military. And so Coriolanus says goodbye to his family and he realizes that he might not ever be able to see the grandmam ever again, because if he has to sell for 20 years, well, then the grandmam gonna die. Sorry to this man. Everything about him is shattered. Basically, all the glory he thought he was going to receive never happens. And so he's shipped off to District 12. But the one thing he does wonder about is what's going to happen to Lucy Gray after the games, and also what's going to happen to him after the games. Because to him and in the capital, everybody knew about the games. But then as he travels to District 12, he realizes that not everybody was fully aware of what was happening in the games. So some people didn't even have access to a television, yes. And he notices that in District 12, no one really recognizes who he is, because he thought he would have to hide and like run away in shame, but no one in District 12 really knows who he is, like at all. Sorry to this man. As he's a peacekeeper, it's very much like the military. You sleep in bunk beds with other people and, you just, you train and you wash a lot of dishes and you have to clean up, etc., etc. And so Snow kind of talks himself into getting used to this life because unfortunately he can see no way out. He's heard nothing from Dr. Gall, and the only contact he has with his family is through letters to Tigris, who tells him that the Snow family home is going to be up for sale because they simply could not afford it. And he sort of cries himself to sleep. Again, it's kind of sad, but at the same time, with the way Coriolanus has been thinking, I don't really have much sympathy for him. Luckily for him, guess who shows up? My man Sejanus. His father made sure that he was able to just become a peacekeeper, and also made sure that he was able to graduate from high school because, again, these kids are still in secondary school. Let's not forget that. As a result, Coriolanus Snow also still gets to finish high school and he still gets a diploma. Sejanus also lets Coriolanus know that there is an opportunity to become something called an officer. And so he lets him know that, hey, now that you're like a high school graduate, you never know, you could rise up to the ranks and become an officer, which gives Coriolanus some spark of hope. But the most important thing that he's thought about right now is Lucy Gray. Where is she? Is she alive? Is she dead? We don't know. Eventually, he finds out that Lucy Gray is still very much alive, and she is touring with the Covey around District 12, and she's performing. They sort of have to get used to settling into life as being a peacekeeper. Unfortunately, Sejanus doesn't recognize what that truly means. A lot of the times, a lot of peacekeepers oversee a lot of hangings, basically. And one hanging that happens that kind of haunts him low-key, high-key is the hanging of someone called Arrow, I think, or Aro. He was a rebel who was responsible for planting a bomb. 3 people died as a casualty from him placing a bomb somewhere else. And so he is sentenced to be hanged. And 2 people also come out of the same car, Mr. Mayor Lip and Mayfair Lip. And so this is the first time that Coriolanus sees a proper hanging. And so this guy is about to be hung, and he has a wife named Lil. We'll come back into the story a little bit later. And so Arrow is stone-faced and he's ready to just die. And then he sees his wife Lil, who shouts out for him. And when he's dropped, he shouts out for his wife Lil. And instantly the jabberjays hear the sound and they copy it. And so when he screams out for Lil, it is echoed throughout the whole entire forest, making Coriolanus and everybody else relive that moment over and over and over again. And it's haunting. And Coriolanus instantly gets freaked the fuck out by whatever made that sound. And so it's established that those are jabberjays, which will play a huge role later on. Besides all these things that are kind of haunting him, and so because again, they don't really have any money, they won't be paid until like an upcoming month, the guys barter food that is sent by Sejanus's mother, Mrs. Plinth, because she is a mother, she's mothering and we stan her. She sends Sejanus a lot of sweets and like food and a lot of like baking stuff as well. And so they kind of use it to like barter because again, District 12 doesn't have that much food at all to begin with. And so they try and barter this in a way to get other things such as alcohol, or they call it moonshine. And eventually they get tickets into seeing Lucy Gray and the Covey perform. Coriolanus gets to see Lucy Gray once again. He stands up after the performance to go like try and kiss her and be like, oh my gosh, Lucy Gray. And then another menace comes out. The menace we know as Billy Top. And not only is he drunk, but he also comes out with this other girly, our girly here, Mayfair Lip. She was responsible for making sure that her father put Lucy Gray's name in the reaping. I told y'all she was gonna come back. I told y'all she is the reason why this girl ended up being in the reaping in the first place. Why? I'll tell you in just a second. Billy is drunk and he's fighting the Covey, and he's like drunk fighting the Covey, and the Covey's like, hey, we don't want you anymore because Billy Top used to be a part of the Covey and now he's not any longer. And so Coriolanus is piecing these 2 things together, and he realizes the lover that Lucy Gray was singing about in her previous song was Billy Top. Bet that he made. And so instantly he gets jealous, as per usual. They have this like a little mini brawl happens, but it gets mellowed down, and Lucy Gray says that Billy Top is no longer welcome in the Covey. They don't want him anymore. He's gone. He's trash. He's garbage. Coriolanus finally gets to see Lucy Gray properly, and they reunite. He also gets to meet the other members of the Covey. And Maud Ivory is Lucy Gray's cousin, and so is Barb. And then Clerk and Billy were also family related, and Tam Amber is the only one who's not related to them. Maud Ivory also ends up explaining that their names are a little bit weird because they combine like a name and a color together. So Lucy's is Lucy and Gray, Maud Ivory is Maud and the color is ivory, etc., etc. But aside from their love story kind of happening, in their peacekeeper job, again, bringing back the topic of jabberjays and mockingjays, he really hates mockingjays. He hates them so much that he asks the commander, because they have shooting practice, he asks the commander to make the mockingjays shooting practice. Like, he wants to shoot them down. That's how much he hates them. That theme comes back later on, but let me set the scene for you, right? So him and Lucy Gray have a lot of conversations this time, because they're able to finally talk, right? And they kind of get past that honeymoon phase in which they discuss how they really feel about certain things. And first of all, the first thing that Coriolanus has to get over is his jealousy over Billy Top. And again, he reinforces that she is his girl. And he says something that is a glaring red flag. And he said that like, he mentions in his brain that sometimes he wishes that Lucy Gray was in the Capitol so that she could be his girl again, so that like he could have control, because now Lucy Gray is a free woman and Billy Top could like try and seduce her or something. Like, that is literally his train of thought, not word for word, but his train of thought is like, I would rather have this girl controlled in the Capitol so I could always have access to her, and that Billy Top can never have access to her. It is so disturbing. But then one day, the peacekeepers have to go on this sort of like excursion where they have to work with some of the people from Dr. Gall's laboratory. And what they do is that they're trying to collect jabberjays back into the Capitol, because in the war, the jabberjays were created as birds that could record what people said. And so what the Capitol did is that they made these and then they like released them out into the wild, and it ended up not working because of the fact that the jabberjays were in the wild. They ended up mixing with mockingbirds, creating the mockingjay. But the thing is, mockingjays cannot repeat words. They can only just sing. So they can only repeat harmonies, basically. But jabberjays can repeat words. Snow is having a conversation with the person who was actually responsible for overseeing the Jabberjay project. And he recognizes that because the jabberjays didn't really work, they were a failure. The districts got smart and they started recognizing they were being recorded, so they would send false messages, etc., etc. Snow kind of feels like he's better than this lady because he's like, well, at least I didn't create such a failure for the Capitol. Shut the fuck up, please. So she's having a discussion with him and she shows him how the jabberjays work and they record. And so basically she says that like there's two modes where the jabberjay is neutral, it's not recording anything, and it sings and it just lives its life. And then if she sets them on record, they get very silent. They still move, but they get very silent. They record until the person puts them back on neutral. And remember this, because this is going to come back. It's going to come back a little bit later. But one thing that is very glaring in this chapter that made me a little bit curious and also a little bit pissed is how much Snow calls the mockingjays an abomination. And the only reason why he tolerates jabberjays is because jabberjays are made from the Capitol. But he calls the mockingjay an abomination because he cannot comprehend how a Capitol's creation can mix with something, creating something that is an abomination. And when I first heard this, I thought, is this to say, or is this to foreshadow this sort of theme where there's a separation between the Capitol and the districts, and something from the Capitol mixing with something from the districts is an abomination to Snow? But then I did some research on it, and it's actually, some people suggest that the reason why Snow hates the mockingjays is because they are not controlled like the jabberjays. He doesn't like things that are not controlled because he believes that without control, they would be chaos. And the way he rants about them in his head is really bad. Like, it goes on for almost half of the chapter. It's very annoying, and it also kind of makes me upset how much he can hate something simply because it's Capitol made and not Capitol made. But I digress. So he goes back to Lucy Gray and he tells her about this whole mockingjay, jabberjay fiasco, basically. She doesn't agree with his sentiment, and she actually thinks that it's kind of concerning how the Capitol controls the voices of birds, because birds should be natural creations and they should be able to be free. And you see, this is where the slow cracks in Snow's and Lucy's relationship start to show. Because before, the both of them were just kind of focused on survival, so they never really had time to get to know each other. But now that they are starting to get to know each other, Snow is slowly realizing that they don't have much in common. And you as the reader, you see it. Snow is very much pro-Capitol and everybody else is not. He believes that the Capitol is in the right to control people, that there needs to be law and order, and without that, man would go stir crazy. A sentiment that Dr. Gall specifically told Snow back when he was in the arena with Sejanus. Remember, Bobbin came to attack Snow when they were in the arena. Dr. Gall came to visit him in the hospital, and she told him that she wanted him to really experience what it felt like to see death and see human nature in its most prime form. And she sort of painted and seeped this idea into Coriolanus's head that without law and order, human beings would just kill each other and there would be chaos. And so Snow, even though he doesn't recognize it, that thought remains in the back of his head even while he's a peacekeeper. It's just very clear how Dr. Gall spins things to fit her own narrative. Yes, human beings, as history has proven, human beings can be very much focused on their own survival, and yes, survival of the fittest, and yes, human beings can kill each other. But remember that these circumstances that she's proving her hypothesis on has been created by Dr. Gall. This is not human nature in its primal form. It is you wanting to punish districts in your own little weird way and justify it by saying that human beings would kill each other anyway. And again, when Coriolanus Snow is having this similar conversation with Lucy Gray, she establishes that human beings also have good qualities and traits. They can also help each other. And this is where Coriolanus and her have like a big disagreement. They also have another disagreement later on. They also have disagreements concerning Billy Top as well, where Lucy Gray has to reassure him that she's not going back to him, and because he gets really jealous very, very quickly. Again, glaring red flag. But I just wanted to establish that kind of connection. But anyways, I digress. So while this is all happening and this is his new world and he's getting used to it and he's being confronted with these alternative ideas on how to live and he's resisting them, Sejanus has been holding a secret. You see, Sejanus has been acting a little bit strange. He's also been helping Coriolanus Snow throughout this whole entire time, making sure that he can see Lucy Gray, so he's still an ultimate golden retriever sweetheart. We stand. But Sejanus Splint hasn't been completely honest either. And while they're at the Hob, Coriolanus sees that Sejanus Splint actually leaves, and he goes to see somebody who we end up finding out was Lil, who was the wife of the man who was hanged, Arrow. And so immediately Coriolanus is like, hey, this is a rebel. What are you doing with them? And so Sejanus Splint tells him, no, I was just trying to buy a pocket knife. That's what he says, okay? Coriolanus starts to suspect him because at this time, Sejanus has never really shown any alternative characteristics besides being super sweet and kind. And Coriolanus now recognizes that, hey, this guy can also lie to me. And the way he goes about it is very sinister because he sort of sees things again from his own perspective. So like, he's like, well, what if he's planning to do something? You can hear how Coriolanus sort of derangedly thinks throughout the whole entire book, and it's very concerning, and it gets worse from here on out. So as a result, Coriolanus constantly keeps an eye on him, right? And eventually he goes to their lockers where they have their little mementos boxes full of everything that they needed. And so he snoops through Sejanus Splint's things, and he sees that Sejanus Splint, underneath his diploma, has a wad full of cash. And he immediately is like, and Coriolanus, again, he does not like Sejanus Splint. Let's not forget this. Coriolanus does something where he tries to coerce the truth out of Sejanus Splint. And so what he does is he recognizes that Sejanus really, really goes along with anything that is empathetic and sympathetic, basically. And so he tells Sejanus that he sees him like a brother. And so Sejanus is touched and he's like, oh my God, that's literally the kindest thing ever, because Sejanus up to this point has considered Snow as a friend. Coriolanus doesn't actually like Sejanus like that at all, but he does it because he knows that that way Sejanus will confess whatever the fuck he's been doing behind the scenes. And so the next day, Sejanus does something very, very stupid. And so he confesses to Snow that actually there has been a secret plan this whole entire time. Unfortunately for Sejanus, because the peacekeepers have been working with the jabberjays and the mockingjays, a jabberjay is inside the room where Sejanus decides to tell Coriolanus Snow about his plan to escape with the other people. And while Sejanus is talking, because now he thinks that, right, this guy has said that we're brothers and I trust him and I can tell him this plan, Coriolanus presses record on the jabberjay and records the message that Sejanus gives to Coriolanus. And Coriolanus does not speak. And he doesn't speak until he is stopped recording. Sejanus has no idea. And Coriolanus just pretends as if nothing has just happened. He sort of makes a split-second decision, and then he just doesn't stop himself from deleting the message from the jabberjay. And he knows that this is going to be going to the Capitol very, very soon. And he just doesn't delete the message. And so the jabberjay, with Sejanus' plan to escape District 12, sent back to the Capitol, where Dr. Gall is going to hear that message. He's like, well, maybe no one will listen to the message. Maybe no one will hear the message. You know what I mean? Like maybe it won't happen and you'll be fine. And so the book moves on to the night at the Hob where the Covey kids are performing. And so Sejanus leaves like he did the last time. And Coriolanus waits 10 seconds, and then he leaves to follow Sejanus out of the Hob. And so he follows him into this garage barn area. Coriolanus follows Sejanus into the barn. He sees a few people, and he also sees a bag of firearms. So it's Spruce, Billy Top, Sejanus, and now Coriolanus in the door. Sejanus tells Spruce that Coriolanus is one of them. Somebody else shows up that we didn't expect, Mayfair Lip, and somebody else also shows up after her performance, Lucy Gray. And so when they're all in this barn, Mayfair now confronts Lucy Gray and she says, hey, how was the Capitol? Taunting the fact that Lucy Gray was entered because of Mayfair speaking to her father about Lucy Gray, and he put her name into the reaping. Just pouring salt into an open wound, basically. Unfortunately, because Mayfair has now entered this barn, she now knows about this plan to leave the Capitol. And so it becomes very, very deranged very, very quickly. But because Mayfair is now aware of this plan, Coriolanus is thinking to himself that if Mayfair goes back to Mayor Lip's home and she mentions that Coriolanus was there, he's fucked. So he grabs the gun and he shoots Mayfair Lip. This is his second kill, by the way. And so he immediately tells Lucy Gray to go back and pretend that she was backstage the whole entire time, and that would be her alibi. After shooting Mayfair, Billy Top gets angry. And then he's like, because remember, someone's gonna have to hang for this crime. If Mayfair is gonna die, then Lucy Gray is gonna die with him. And so Spruce shoots Billy Top in the chest. And boy, oh boy, is it a mess. With Billy and Mayfair dead, it is only Spruce and Coriolanus and Sejanus who are left. Sejanus is completely shocked at everything that's happening. Spruce is ready to get his stuff and get the fuck out of there because he said he's leaving. And Coriolanus has now killed his second person. And this time it was not self-defense, so he can't defend himself. And Lucy Gray also had to be a witness. So Lucy Gray goes back to the covey. Snow has gone to sit down with Sejanus to pretend like he was also part of the performance. After the performance is over, Maud Ivory comes back into the barn and she screams. And everybody finds out that Mayfair is dead, and so is Billy Top. All hell breaks loose from here on out in the rest of the book. Instantly, Snow is fucking paranoid. He's paranoid because he does not know where the weapon is going to go, because he couldn't carry it with himself. So he doesn't know where the weapon with his DNA is going to go. He doesn't know who is going to blab, etc., etc. And so he panics and he gets extremely paranoid for the rest of the book. Everyone just keeps their mouth shut about this. But as a result, Snow cannot see Lucy Gray as much any longer because they're trying to just keep themselves apart to make sure that no one really suspects anything. Meanwhile, the message that was recorded from Sejanus is still back at the Capitol, BTW. Everyone's wondering who killed these two people, and so the peacekeepers and the officers are investigating what the hell happened, right? Finally, just a few days later, they're all sitting together, all the peacekeepers are sitting together for lunch, and immediately officers come through the door. And Coriolanus is like, oh my God, I knew it. This is the moment. We're all gonna die. The officers don't come for Coriolanus. No, no, no. They come for Sejanus. And they pack Sejanus and they take him to the commander's office, and he's never seen with the peacekeepers again. Sejanus was packed not because of the fact that he was a witness to Billy Top's and Mayfair Lip's murder. No, no. He is packed because of the message that Coriolanus sent to the Capitol. And he is set to hang for treason. Turns out the message did get delivered to Dr. Gall. Sejanus, within the speed of fucking lightning at this point, within one day, is taken to be hanged. Snow tries to write to Mrs. Plinth about Sejanus, thinking that maybe they could help him. Of course, this is a letter, so he cannot get there fast enough. And eventually the next day, Sejanus is hanged. The Jabberjays pick up what he says. He just screams out "Ma" the whole entire time. And the sound haunts Coriolanus Snow because he knows he is the reason why Sejanus is dead. But in this weird sort of way, because Sejanus and Coriolanus were never really true friends from Coriolanus's perspective, he is affected by this death, but it doesn't really take him that long. Again, Coriolanus is not normal. No shade, no tea, no disrespect. But Coriolanus is not the average person. He does not think like the average person, and he does not mourn like the average person. But still, with all of this happening, and now Sejanus dead, Coriolanus is still freaking out because the murder weapon is still out there somewhere. And unfortunately, Mayor Lip is now on the prowl for who the fuck killed his daughter. So he immediately suspects Lucy Gray because he thinks, Of course, his daughter was the reason why Lucy Gray was in the reaping, so he blames Lucy Gray immediately without any sort of evidence. And so he circles their house a lot of the times where he sits outside of the car in front of the house where the Covey lives. Basically, she is like, okay, I have to leave. This guy's gonna kill me at some point. He's just waiting for me to leave the house to accuse me of something again. And not to mention, he slapped her the last time in public in front of the reaping, so God knows what he can do. And so Lucy Gray tells Coriolanus that, hey, I'm gonna go with the rebels. We're still gonna leave. We're gonna run away. They have an escape plan. Let's go. And Coriolanus, because he's still freaked out about the murder weapon not being anywhere he recognizes it, is like, okay, sure. So he packs his shit for the next morning and they agree to meet each other by the hanging tree. I love how Suzanne Collins really worked this into her book. Like, again, just having seen the Hunger Games first and then this, it just works. It just works. But anyways, so Coriolanus packs his stuff. He's in his mind, he's like super paranoid and he's like, well, maybe I'll enjoy it over there. You know, this is better than anything. Let me pack my shit. Let me go. I'm going to be free with Lucy Gray. Even though we've seen that his lifestyle and the way he's been brought up because he's capital is completely different from Lucy Gray. I mean, they had a conversation about butter. They were trying to make butter for Maud Ivory. And Coriolanus recognizes that he's never actually asked where butter comes from because, you know, like he's never had to ask, basically. So he packs his shit and he's ready to escape in the morning at like 6 a.m., that kind of early time. They sit down at this like specific location where it's kind of like their halfway point, right? It's not that far from where the peacekeepers are, but it's also halfway to wherever they're supposed to be going. And so Lucy Gray tells him, hey, like, okay, let me go get some food. A Katniss. And turns out Katniss is actually the name of the root. It's the root of a plant that is, I think, a sort of potato or something. And she says, let me go get Katniss, which the foreshadowing, like everything about that is so great. Oh my God. But basically, she goes to get this Katniss, right? And Coriolanus notices something. He notices like a bag in this place and he opens the bag and he sees the murder weapon that he used to shoot Mayfair lip. And instantly, Snow becomes a different person very, very quickly. He never really liked the idea of like collecting roots and, you know, doing stuff organically. Never really sat well with him, but he was willing to do it because he thought he had no other option. He thought that the other option for him was death because the murder weapon was still out there. But now that the murder weapon was in his vicinity, oh baby, Snow becomes a different person very, very quickly. And in this chapter, all hell breaks loose. So Snow looks at this weapon and it makes him realize, hey, this means if I have the weapon, I could dispose of this weapon, which means no one in the Capitol is going to find out. None of the peacekeepers are going to find out, which means I'm not going to be tied to the murder, which means I'm not going to die. Then something strange happens. Coriolanus's mind, it just spirals. It's a very, very, very big downward spiral from here on out. Earlier in the book, him and Lucy Gray had a conversation where he sort of let it slip that he's killed 3 people instead of 2. And Lucy Gray's like, 3 people? Which 3 people? She knew about Bobbin and she knew about Mayfair, but she didn't know about Sejanus. So when he let it slip, he was like, oh, no. He tried to justify it by saying something else stupid. And so Coriolanus is not thinking to himself, with this murder weapon, he's probably realized that I was the reason why Sejanus died. And so now he's trying to justify it. And he kind of can't because she knows a lot about him. She knows everything about the plan. She knows everything about his life. And she could spill the beans and it could be over for Coriolanus. So he was like, I can just try and make her see sense with a murder weapon. Anyways, and in this meantime, Lucy Gray had gone outside for quite a while. And so he's like, wait a second, where is Lucy Gray? She's been outside for a while. And so he's like looking at this weapon and he's like, maybe I can become an officer. And so he justifies those thoughts slowly. But then he's like, what about Lucy Gray? She's going to escape because Mayfair is still after her. And so he tries to like slowly, like he does this little dance, this little tango in his brain, right? Slowly but surely. So he goes outside. And so he's like thinking of ways to justify this to Lucy Gray. Maybe we were not meant to be together. You know, maybe this was not meant to work out, you know? And so he goes outside of this like little place and he calls out for Lucy Gray. Lucy Gray does not respond. The only thing he sees, I think, is Lucy Gray's like scarf or something that is hidden on it's like on a bush. So he calls out for Lucy Gray, still having the weapon in his hand, by the way. When he stops by her like scarf, her piece of clothing, a snake jumps out at him and it bites him. But remember, this snake is not like one of the neon snakes from Dr. Gall. This snake looks kind of like the snake that Lucy Gray had at the beginning when she came out for the first time in The Reaping. Remember, she had a snake that went into Mayfair's dress? That kind of snake. That probably wasn't poisonous either. But Snow, at this time, is not thinking. And so he sees her scarf and he sees the snake and he's like, this girl tried to set up a trap for me. She's trying to kill me. Oh, so now I have to kill her. I kid you not, this man within 5 minutes has justified murder. All of the affection, all of the so-called love, all of the everything that he feels for Lucy Gray dissipates within one chapter, within 2 minutes of this book. Here's her like footsteps and he just starts shooting. He doesn't even know where she is. And what Lucy Gray does is that she sings the first verse of The Hanging Tree and the mockingjays pick it up, right? Not jabberjays, the mockingjays. And he hates mockingjays because these are things he cannot control. Just like Lucy Gray, he can't control her either. And because he hates the sound, he just keeps on shooting at them as much as he possibly can. And the sound stops eventually. He goes back to the lake house, grabs his stuff, goes back to the peacekeeper camp as if nothing had happened. And we never hear about Lucy Gray again. He goes back to the camp. Because he left early morning, people are just starting to finally kind of wake up. Not really, so he can still kind of pretend like he was there. And he just justifies, within a quick sentence, he justifies murder in his head. He thinks to himself that Lucy Gray is dead. The truth is, we do not know if Lucy Gray is really dead. I don't think so. I think the majority of people don't think so. But he goes back into the peacekeepers camp, and eventually he's being told by the officer that he's going to be sent back to the capital so he can continue his studies. You know why? Because Dr. Gall has sent for him. So he takes a hovercraft back into the capital, but at this time he thinks, because he's not really sure, so he thinks that he's going to be an officer, but Dr. Gall has other plans for him, and so he is actually flown to where Dr. Gall is, and so they have a little meeting. Yep, and Dr. Gall tells him she sent him to be a peacekeeper so that he could see nature in its primal form and that he can get experience. And mind you, Snow at this point is gone. The cute little, not even cute, the teenage boy who was just a brat and was super selfish is now a completely different person. After the death of Lucy Gray, which was like the one human being that really gave him alternative thinking in his life, is now dead. Coriolanus is unhinged, and now he's going to be under the mentorship of Dr. Gall. See, before he used to fear Dr. Gall because even he knew that she was fucking insane. Now he's gotten to a point of insanity where he actually relates with Dr. Gall now. Coriolanus let back into the university where he continues studying under the mentorship of Dr. Gall. And it's not completely over. Coriolanus, because he sent a letter to Sejanus's mother, also gets back in touch with the Plinths. And because they do not know that he is the reason why their son died, Mr. Strabo Plinth and Mrs. Plinth are so stricken with grief that they think, all right, this guy was our son's friend. So what they do is they kind of like adopt him, and they pay for his education, they pay for his housing, they pay for everything for him, so he never has to worry about money again, while being the person that was responsible for their son dying in the first place. I cannot make this up. I can't. It doesn't end there. Coriolanus finally meets with Casca Highbottom for the last time in this book. And remember, in the little box that Sejanus bought with him, he had some mementos. One thing that I didn't mention that he had in there was a morphling bottle. So a bottle full of this drug that Casca Highbottom loves taking. And so Coriolanus has that bottle with him as he goes to confront Casca Highbottom because he hates him, because Casca is also part of the reason why he was sent as a peacekeeper in the first place. And he goes to him and he's like, he has this morphling bottle and he has a confrontation with Casca Highbottom. Snow leaves the bottle of morphling. I think Snow left it in the trash, actually. I'm not really sure. So Casca Highbottom, after Snow is left, goes to dig in the trash for the morphling bottle, takes it, he dies because Coriolanus had taken some rat poison and placed it in the morphling bottle. Casca Highbottom is dead. I don't know how to react to the ending of this book. I listened to the whole book and I remember sitting down and just feeling super hollow after listening to it because I was like, what the fuck is this? My final thoughts are, I fucking hate Snow. I hate him. I've hated him since the day this book started. I hated him, and I better not see some people trying to ship Lucy Gray and Snow together, because this guy was never redeemable from the beginning. I think that's one of the reasons I really hated this, is because Snow, like, because I know that Snow becomes a horrible person in the Hunger Games. Like, I know that he is not redeemable in the slightest. I just hated him. But anyways, y'all, I am so tired now. I am exhausted. I cannot wait to see this movie. I have been doing this over the last 2 days, and editing this is gonna suck ass. But y'all, tell me how you guys feel in the comments. I know there's definitely some scenes I've missed, because if I had talked about every single scene, this video would have been 3 hours long, and I cannot do that to myself. I need mental health. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate every single one of you, and stay tuned for more. Stay tuned for more music coming out very soon, and I will see you guys in the next video. Okay, bye.